Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to look at the Gamesir G8 Galileo Type-C controller for Android devices. And the reason I'm looking at this is I happen to have a Razer Edge, which I really like. It's a really nice handheld. It, of course, has a detachable controller. This is the Kishi V2 Pro. And, you know, the only thing probably bad about the controller maybe is that doesn't quite have the ergonomics of a full console controller, and it's got relatively small joysticks here. And, you know, the nice thing about the Razer, though, is you don't have to use this controller if you don't want to. You can actually pair up another one. I've actually tried the Edge out with the Galileo G8 Plus, but that one is Bluetooth. And I wanted to see if I could get something somewhat similar for my Edge, but USB-C instead. So this is the USB-C G8, and what we're going to do is we're going to open this box, going to see what this device looks like, and we're going to test it out with the Razer Edge. Of course, it'll work the same way on pretty much any Android smartphone that has USB-C, but the Razer Edge is what I've got, so that's what we're going to test with. Let's get this box open. So I've got my little Leatherman Micra here, and might not need it. Maybe I can peel these off without using the blade. So let's see what we can do here. One. Two. Of course, that one's underneath something. 3. Well, let's see if we can get this out of here. Yep, tore the box a little bit, but that's okay. Looks almost like an Anbernic box. Hopefully it's better than an Anbernic. Yeah, a little fancier insides than a typical Anbernic device. So what do we got in here? Looks like instructions, chicken head stickers. Hopefully won't need these just to get this set up. This is supposed to be plug and play. We will find out. So we have extra caps here. We have the controller itself. USB-C. This has a good bit of thickness to it. Let me pull out my Razer Edge controller here. It's got a good bit more heft to the controller. One thing, it's actually significantly heavier. And the other thing is it's got these ergonomic grips on here, which is one of the things that I actually liked about the G8 Plus, was that it was a pretty ergonomic controller. Made me feel like using the Edge was more like using an actual, you know, full-size controller. You can see these sticks are definitely more full-size console than the Razer controller. The Razer controller is more like Switch sticks. They do work pretty well. They work better than the ones on the actual Nintendo Switch, but they're still small. These are a good bit bigger, have a good bit more travel. So, looking at the controller itself, move some of this stuff out of the way. Looks like we've got the usual complement of buttons here. These, now, we hadn't tested the performance yet, but just feel, these are pretty nice. These feel like nice console sticks. The buttons are not quite small and clicky like the ones on the Razer controller. Looks like we've got some macros on the back, might be able to be programmed. And one of the things that was appealing about this was I believe this charger does pass through charging, which is nice for keeping it hooked to something like the Razer Edge. And also, there is a headphone jack, which hopefully works. because the Razer Edge itself does not actually have a headphone jack. The only way to hook up headphones to the Edge is through the controller. So let's just see if this will fit in here. Hopefully it will. I think this thing stretches out a good bit. Yeah, that's some definitely a good amount of stretch there. Now, I think the vents will be okay because of the Razer's design. So hopefully it won't block the vents up too bad. So I'm going to stretch this out, plug it in. Actually fits pretty securely. Oh, actually, there is, I don't know if you can see it without getting the reflection here. There we go. There is actually space for the vents. So this controller does not interfere with the vents on the Razer Edge. So if you have a Razer Edge, and you're worried about that sort of thing, that's taken care of. Now, I have not unlocked this thing, so we will pause for a second for an unlock. So we're unlocked, and so far the controller was recognized immediately, at least as far as I can tell. Maybe it really is plug and play. Now, what all the buttons do, who knows? But it looks like we have the controller ready to go. So what we will do is, I think we will test this thing out. We'll do some just controller test stuff, and we'll do some games, maybe do a little Borderlands, and see how this thing works with something like a first-person shooter. But so far, this actually feels pretty good in the hand. You know, I usually use my Edge when I'm playing with this extra grip here, just to give the controllers a little bit more feel in the hand. But I don't think it's necessary with the Galileo. So first impressions, without actually having used it to play a game, this feels pretty nice. So let's actually do a little testing and check this thing out. Okay, so we have pulled up one Gamepad testing app in Firefox. So take a look at this. Got our triggers here, of course, analog triggers here. Yeah, these feel like pretty good sticks here. We'll see how they actually work in game. D-pad is not nearly as, I guess, clicky as the Kishi is. If you like clicky controllers, the Kishi is definitely a good pick for you. These buttons feel more like normal controller buttons than the Razer controller does. So far so good with this testing app. Well, we got another, let's look and see if this has any kind of snapping problems. So it's not an Ambernick. This is nice and pretty smooth behavior here. Doesn't look like I have any trouble going pretty much wherever I want. Not going to do them both. It'll just take a while. But, you know, just in these tester apps, this looks like a pretty good controller. I think mainly because of the size of the sticks, this feels like kind of a step up from the Razer one. Of course, the Razer one is more compact. That's the trade-off. But, you know, this is going to definitely be a more console-like experience, I think, on the Razer Edge, rather than just using the built-in controller. So, let's actually load up some games, or a game at least, and see how this goes. Okay, so we have Borderlands 2 for the PlayStation Vita up and running here. And you might notice I have audio cable hooked up here. This is the audio output jack for the G8, and we are going to see if that actually works. Right now the audio is muted, so you can't hear anything, but when we start to do a little gameplay here, we'll unmute it and see if we can actually hear Borderlands 2 gameplay audio. I think it'll work based on the little bit of testing I did with VLC before actually starting this game, but we will find out. So let's try a little bit of Borderlands 2 and see how this controller holds up. Just need to go find somebody to shoot. A little close for the sniper rifle, but whatever. Not the fault of the controller, it's just hard to see him up there at night. Not bad. This is definitely way better than playing with the Vita controller on an actual Vita. And does feel a bit more precise than using the original Razer controller that came with the Edge. So if you're looking to play yourself some Borderlands, this might be a nice pickup. Or some other stick-focused games. Now, I'm more of a stick-focused gamer here, so I'm not going to say much about the D-pad, although it seems to work as advertised. Don't have too many weapons on this playthrough because I just set up the DLC in Borderlands 2, and if you want to know how to do that and you're having trouble with it, I actually have a video about setting up Borderlands 2 DLC on the Vita elsewhere on the channel. I will link in the description if anybody wants to take a look. With the actual DLC enabled, the this version of Borderlands, people thought it was bad because it didn't run very well on the original Vita, but it's a good way to get Borderlands onto an Android device. It's quite playable through emulation. There's still some glitches in it, but more or less it works pretty well. Doesn't take up a whole lot of space either compared to installing more modern versions of the game. No real trouble with aiming here, just the bad guys are a little more difficult to see during the night. Like one more somewhere. Not much of a threat. So far so good with Borderlands and the Galileo G8 USB-C controller. This does feel a lot more like playing it on a console or maybe the PlayStation TV with a better frame rate than playing it on plain old Android handheld. Now let's look at a PlayStation 1 game, Colony Wars, running on DuckStation.
You are targeting friendly craft.
This is Midas Starport. Surrounding area clear. Well done. You are clear to dock.
Commencing docking sequence.
Too bad. The analog control worked pretty well. Sometimes those little fighters in this first level are pretty hard to just shoot down with the very first ship because they're so maneuverable. And this joystick is definitely good enough so that you can actually catch them without having to just use missiles to stun each one of them. I just stunned the last one just to help it go by a little bit faster. Here's a little platformer game, Gex for the PlayStation 1.
I'll take this, and this, and this. Ah, that Scientologist lust for life. Sweet, like candy. This one's for Johnny. Geronimo! Go into the light. For me, you should go. Just
Oh well, not getting up there this time.
need it, need it, need it, need it. I'll take this, and this, and this. Sweet, like candy. Geronimo! Kill your TV, man.
Well, Gex seems to work well enough with the D-pad, at least for this simple platformer game. Hadn't actually played that game in a while. Well, we have put the Gamesir G8 Galileo USB-C controller through its paces. And what's the verdict so far? Well, so far I like this controller. It is a nice, probably a more comfortable one to use than the Kishi that came with the Edge, because it's got the little bit better ergonomics. The sticks are, of course, bigger, and they have more travel, so a little bit more precise. So if you're playing games that require more precision aiming, these are going to be kind of better for your gaming than these little guys. That said, there are some caveats here. One thing is portability. If you're looking to take your Edge somewhere, or your phone for that matter, this is a good bit smaller than this is. So you can get the Edge and a controller in a box that's not very much bigger than the Edge itself. Whereas this is going to have a lot more heft and weight to it. So something to consider for traveling. This is going to be a little bit more convenient, the smaller controller. A couple other things. The main thing I kind of had issues with this device was pass-through charging. With the Kishi controller from the Edge, I can just plug this into my normal USB-C controller, and it will charge the Edge, although it will charge the Edge at a slower rate than just plugging in the Edge by itself. So plugging this in, whether you use USB-C to C or A to C, you generally get about, I think, 10 watts of power charging the device. And when I tried using a USB-C to C cable here, it showed that it was charging, but it was only drawing 1 watt, so it wasn't really charging at all. And I could not get USB-C to C charging to work properly with this controller at all. Now, I've got it charging right now, and it's charging at about 9 watts. And I've actually noticed the battery has come up some since I plugged it in. So it is charging, but I had to use a USB-A to C charger cable. And that kind of reminds me a lot of a lot of cheap handheld devices that have USB-C ports but don't really properly implement the USB-C standard. So you end up getting, it won't charge from a USB-C to C connector. And I have my Anchor charger here, and it's usually pretty good about charging anything that can be charged over USB-C. And heck, it even charges some of the Anbernic devices. But no go with the Gamesir G8. I thought, well, maybe it's a firmware issue, maybe it's something maybe they fixed, but I try to get the firmware, and as you can see, the firmware doesn't work on the Razer Edge. I could probably sideload it if I wanted to go through the trouble, but it is something to be aware of. For whatever reason, I can't install anything to update the firmware of this controller with the Play Store, which is kind of annoying for a device that says it's for a device that actually says on the box it supports down to Android 6. So it's not an Android version issue. It's just some weirdness that they have, the software set up, so I just can't download it through the Play Store. So maybe this sort of thing is corrected in a firmware update, maybe it's not, but at the moment, I don't really have a way to check. But so if you want to actually charge your device via the USB-C connector, be aware that it's going to be slow. The Edge actually can fast charge, but you can't fast charge through this controller. I think 10 watts is the maximum I've seen this thing pull. As you can see, the battery just went up again. So it's charging. It's just charging slowly, but only with a USB-A to C connector. So it's something to be aware of if you're planning on taking this controller with you, and not one like this. Make sure you have a USB-A to C connector if you want to charge your phone, while you have the controller connected. Of course, you can always just take the controller off, but the whole point of having the USB-C port there is so you can actually charge it just with the normal cable that you use. So this is definitely a point against the G8 here. So something to be aware of. Another thing with the controller is it's a little, it's not loose. It's just that there's a little bit of flex here that you might be aware of. I don't get that issue with the original controller that came with the Edge, but then again, they pretty much designed the Edge to fit in that controller, so maybe that's not quite fair. The device is held in here pretty securely. Now, if you start having phones with more rounded edges, maybe you start ending up with grip issues, but so far I haven't had any problem with the grip here. The thing to point out here, maybe, is that they've designed this to be flexible here, probably just to account for phones of different thicknesses, which makes sense, but it is kind of a potential point of failure here because it's, kind of loose, and it's something that's not an issue with the controller that came with the Edge. So something to be careful about when you're plugging it in. I haven't really had trouble plugging it in, but I've tried to make sure that when I connect this thing, it would help if I put it in the right way. Screen orientation got me there. I haven't really had too much trouble putting it in, but definitely be aware of the fact that that USB-C port or connector can flex up and down. So keep an eye on it when you plug it in. Just make sure you don't, jam it closed and potentially break that. So far, I'm enjoying this. There are some caveats here that I've mentioned in the in this video. This is not really meant to be a full review, just kind of an unboxing and first impressions. But having played with it a couple hours, those are the quirks that I've seen with the controller so far. It does feel really good in the hands, and I'm definitely going to be using it a fair bit when I'm at home, but I think when I'm on the go, if I want to take a controller with me, it'll probably still be this one, mainly just because of the size. This is way easier to pack in my bag along with the Razer than this thing. Although not impossible, just takes up more space in the bag, which I don't have right now. So, hope you enjoyed this little unboxing and first impressions video of the Gamesir G8 USB-C controller. And if you like this content, remember to leave me a like. It helps people find my videos in the unknown and unknowable YouTube search algorithms. Also, if you would like to see more gaming content, not just for Android handhelds like this, but I do some PC stuff as well, then subscribe to the channel. Every little bit of subscriptions helps. Now, again, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.